Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Reddit Universe. Serious? Fathers who abandoned your family, why'd you do it? A. Frick it. No throwaway. I was 20 when my daughter was born. Living about 4.5 hours away from home, friends, family, and everything familiar. Never wanted to be a dad thanks to a pretty crummy upbringing. When things took a turn for the worse in the relationship, I bailed. I knew I couldn't survive up there on my own. Young, immature, crappy job, etc. So I left during a heated argument in the middle of the night. I kinda just escaped. I pushed her out of my mind and did things of my own accord. Paid child support when I could. Birthday presents. Maybe a phone call every once in a while. There was no father-daughter relationship. When you're several states away and never see her, it's a lot easier to pretend she didn't exist. Having no connection, it wasn't the hardest thing to do. I lived my own life with not much thought about her. This went on for a few years. I made a move to the West Coast and during a trip back home in the East, I took a visit to see her. I remember crashing on my ex's couch and being awoken by a tiny person. She was 4 at this point. Me and her mother both agreed that I don't bring up who I am or try to play dad. Just spend the day with her and enjoy ourselves. It was incredibly awkward for me at first. But, slowly, things fell into places. Watching her stumble in winter boots, listen to her relay stories, experiment with new food, lemon poppy seed muffin, dance while we wait for the bus. Thanks to an odd encounter with an employee at an American Eagle, she called me dad. Surreal moment where I locked eyes with her, then her mom. It felt warm and beautiful and loving. We both ignored the comment, but everything inside of me was raging with emotion. We spent the remainder of the day goofing around and assembling a bed. After we put her to said bed, me and her mum talked for a few hours. It was an easy realization for me after everything that happened that day. I needed to be there. I'll skip most of the details, but the visit happened in October 2010. I made plans to live there by 2012. I moved back home from Cali, worked several jobs, saved, planned everything meticulously so I wouldn't be forced back. In December 2011, I made the move up north. Our relationship was essentially friendship for a few months. She didn't have a father figure in her life and I wasn't about to drop a "hey surprise, I'm the dad you've been missing." In the beginning it was her coming over for a Friday night sleepover or random park trips. Figuring out everything and how to be a dad. It was intense and the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Still learning, as I think every dad never stops figuring things out. I eventually told her who I was and it wasn't this big emotional moment. I was just her dad and she was happy to finally have one around. She doesn't realize I was missing for most of her childhood and it's a conversation I'm not looking forward to having. I'll be honest and upfront. Hopefully by then she'll understand how much I regret it. If not, then I'll work on patching everything up. Won't quit this time around. Our relationship is perfect now. I have partial custody. She stays with me half of the week. We have paint fights and bake cakes, play flashlight tag in cemeteries, etc. My life is amazing and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I can't hate on the deadbeat dad thing, because I was one. I totally understand the mentality of not giving a frick about your kid since I was a guy who had that going for him. I want to say it was immaturity and fear of fatherhood that held me back, but who knows? I'm sure it's different for everyone. My dad's military and I was born in another country without him for years. He finally came back and decided he wanted to make things with my mother, who is a saint. I understand what it's like, so from my experience, they won't hold it against you considering you could have left entirely. When I was young I suffered a traumatic brain injury. Now in my 30s, I am suffering the aftershock of that event. I confuse easily, my memory is falling apart in little pieces. I have to ask people to repeat themselves often, because their words make no sense to me the first and sometimes second time around. Like gibberish, sleep disorders, depression, clinical severe, and I have close to no control over my emotions. I wasn't always like this. I was a husband and a father to 4 kids. For 12 years I was married. One morning after a fight with my then wife, I attempted suicide. I was in a psych ward for around 8 days, and when I was released I was picked up by an advocate and driven to the airport to fly back to our home state to seek help with my mental health. 2 months after arriving, I received divorce papers in the mail. So, I'm not a part of my children's lives, because I'm becoming more and more unbalanced each passing year. I'm 33 years old. I am losing my memories. I have absolutely no control over my emotions. I understand why she did it. I don't want my kids to find their daddy dead because he committed suicide. I guess it's not fair of me to want to be back in that life. All I ever wanted to be was a father and a husband. But because of my problems that won't go away, I was sent on a plane 3,000 miles away from the only things I cared about. I know I'm a burden. I know that I'm getting worse. The thought never occurred to me that the mother of my children would throw me away. I wouldn't have done it to her. Not like this. I'm so sorry to anyone who has to live without a dad. I want to be a father to my children, but that was taken from me when I was thrown from a car and suffered at B. I don't get to have that life anymore because the woman I was with for 16 years decided I wasn't worth the trouble. On your good days write your kids letters even if you don't post them. If you do post them, take copies and have someone you trust review them. If you somehow get better and feel able to be part of their lives, or they grow up and are able to have contact with you in the state you're now in, they'll know that you loved them and didn't just walk out because you didn't care. That your breakup didn't have anything to do with not loving them. Just knowing that can be very important to kids, even when they're grown up and outwardly successful adults. Don't be too hard on your ex-wife. She isn't the romantic till death us do part helpmeet you originally thought her to be. There is only so much that some people can cope with in a relationship. Quite a lot of women, when push comes to shove, are pragmatic survivors. It doesn't necessarily make them bad people. Best of luck. That is so sad. I wish I could just give you a hug and make things better. I hope things improve for you. I don't get to have that life anymore because the woman I was with for 16 years decided I wasn't worth the trouble. This made me cry. It doesn't count for much, but I'm sorry and kinda wish I could give you a hug right now. I was a young 20-year-old virgin college student. She was 18 years old and bipolar. Just 2 months into our relationship, she attempted suicide by ODing on her Xanax. I rushed her to the ER where she ended up in the psych ward. I continued to visit her for another few months because she was my first girlfriend, the first girl I had sex with, and I had codependency issues. I had sex with her again when she got out of the psych ward and she ended up pregnant. I panicked and insisted on an abortion. Initially she agreed, but then changed her mind and got angry at me for suggesting it. I didn't know what to do and bought her an engagement ring because I thought it was the right thing to do. My parents convinced me that it was dumb to marry a girl I'd only known for 4 months just because of a baby, especially one with mental issues, so I backed out. She ended up really hating me after that, and when summer came, we both went home thousands of miles away from each other. I was ashamed, so I didn't tell anyone about the baby except my immediate family. It was easier to just pay the child support and pretend that nothing happened. Eventually years passed by, and with each year, it felt more and more awkward to try to make contact. I would occasionally cyberstalk the mother, and I have found that she's recovered from her mental illness and become a great mum who met a great guy that she ended up marrying. It's now 15 years later and my daughter is thriving, judging by Facebook pictures. I wouldn't mind if she wanted to reach out to me, but at this point, I would just be intruding on their happy lives to reach out to them. As someone who met his father at 18, I have to say, you shouldn't leave it up to the child to reach out. That's the adult's job. As far as the child is concerned, you're too busy to be bothered. That's what you've illustrated for 15 years. Meeting your child is not intruding, and a reasonable child will always be willing and looking forward to meet their absent parent, so long as the effort to show is there and it's not a seasonal or well, glad that's done sort of thing. I came back from a tour to find out my wife was pregnant. I was 99% sure it wasn't mine, because things were rocky for months before I deployed. Dead bedroom. I straight up asked her about it. She started off being defensive and accusatory, but eventually she told me that okay, she had been sleeping with a friend of mine while I was gone with the intent of getting pregnant. I asked for a test and she laughed at me, which was enough proof for me. I filed for divorce and she delayed. She also let her friends and family in on it, but said I was leaving her because I didn't want to raise my child. It got to my family as well, and despite explaining the situation, they said they would disown me if I left her. They even tried using the PTSD talk that was in the news about military in general against me, as if my background meant I was touched and should just accept being trapped by someone I used to love. I was stressed, but I am not an idiot. Not long after, I just grabbed what I could as fast as I could and left. If I ever go back, I'll face criminal charges, because I am being held legally responsible for a life that cannot possibly belong to me. There is still no test, and at this point I would not be surprised if one had been produced and tampered to empower the lie. I am thinking it will catch up to me one day, but until then I am living relatively okay elsewhere. It is not right what he did, and I refuse to kneel. I would sooner die or have my legs broken to force surrender than willingly support a woman who attempted to get me to raise a kid that was a result of her own bullshit. She may get me eventually, but by then it'll be too late. She is not getting the payout she planned on. Instead, she is raising a kid alone, though I left her with a nice sob story obviously, and if, when the sword finally comes down, it'll just be so she can feel like she finally got me. She pointlessly ruined both our lives with this crap. I would have given her a kid on return. I just didn't want to impregnate her and then die and leave my unborn child fatherless, and I am never going to forgive her for that. I feel that there is a slight possibility I have a 3-year-old child. I had a one-night stand over 4 years ago. Met her at a bar through a friend of a friend of a friend. We have no mutual friends. A couple months later, she's pregnant. We were using a condom, but she told me to take it off see she was on the pill, so I did, but I never climaxed, so I feel like the chance she got pregnant that night is unlikely, plus she also told me the child wasn't mine. See, the conception date was a couple weeks different after I inquired, and then I lost contact with her, but she has my name, info. But I saw photos on Facebook a few months ago when she popped up as a suggested friend. See, her number was still in my phone. I think the child looks a little like me, but I don't know if I'm just being paranoid or not. What if the wrong guy is raising the child, or else no man is and she just never told me? I don't know what would happen. I don't know if I could be in the kid's life. We were using a condom, but she told me to take it off see, she was on the pill, so I did. Rule number 1. If she says that you don't need a condom, then you definitely need a condom. It's a definite possibility that the child is yours. You say that the conception date is a couple weeks off. Pregnancy is 40 weeks, and they start counting from the first day of the woman's last period. Women usually conceive about 2 weeks after that date. A bit of a weird way of measuring, but that's how it goes. If you know the child's birthday, count back 38-39 weeks and see if that date rings a bell. Babies are also, sometimes, born up to 2 weeks late or months early. The best thing to do is talk to her. Kinda did, kinda didn't. So here's mine. Started dating this girl in high school. Come senior year, a little before we graduated, she cheated on me. Naturally we ended. Finished up school and didn't have any plans on contacting her. Why bother, right? So, fast forward to August. She gets a hold of my new number, tells me she's pregnant. Not sure who the father is. Her parents are forcing her to drag me into it. They're calling me, she's calling me. It was hectic. No matter how many times I told them, there's a good possibility that the baby wasn't mine. Months go by. Some nights she'd text me saying stuff about wanting to go jump off a bridge or run away by herself. Then she wouldn't text back. Here comes November. I started to date this wonderful girl. I was upfront with her about the situation I was in. My ex stopped texting and calling. Things started to improve for me. January rolls around. Still remember the call. Just a hair past 3 p.m. Got a call from her mom. The baby was born this morning. Got up to the hospital. After looking at this little newborn, I realized there was a good chance of him being mine. I was a wreck. Didn't know what to do. So now, the roles were reversed. I started checking up on the baby. Every week, I called see how he was doing. March comes around. Got a summons to show up at the Attorney General's office. So I go. Paternity test time. Cotton swab in the mouth a few times. Pictures of me. Pictures of the baby. That was that. We'd have the result in a few weeks. Finally, after agonizing over it, results are in. You're the father. I was mixed in emotions. I was happy to be a father, even for a guy barely 19. I can't really describe the other emotion. I guess terrified now since it was no longer speculation. Well, we're back at the AG's office. Setting up child support, child custody. She was able to wheel in a modified visitation schedule. For 4 weeks. Could only see him 2 hours every Thursday, then for the next 2 months, it would be every Thursday for 2, plus 12 hours every Saturday. Of course it was never that. Then it went to where I could have him one overnight every weekend. Then finally it went to a normal visitation, every weekend following the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Friday of the month. Had a few issues during the early modified visits, one where she wouldn't give me my son for the 2 hours. She insisted on being right there. Finally, got the police involved like the paperwork said. COPS told us that next time they get involved, they would issue me a ticket. Didn't argue of course, just wanted to see my son. So fast forward a little bit, everything's goodish. Had a few more issues regarding her not handing him over. All documented with police reports. Left my overnight job at Walmart to work at a prison. Well, now my weekends to get him, I have to work. They won't switch my schedule. Can't afford to leave this job, as it pays over $16 an hour. We verbally agree to switch to the weekends I'm off. So, all is good. And then she stops. Won't let me pick him up on my off weekend. No leg to stand on. Can't go to court, as I don't have a lawyer. My schedule is stuck like that for a year. After a year of that, I got a slight promotion. Went from working 12s, down to working on Friday, same pay. Can't get in touch with her. I'm scared to. Had a second kid through all of this, with my current girlfriend of 4.5 years. I'm still scared to call my ex up. I know she doesn't like me, and he's at that age where she can tell him any lie about me. I ran before the baby was born. I moved away from my hometown and quit my job to move to a small town with my girlfriend. We decided I'd move there and get settled in with a house and all. After 2 months she told me she wasn't moving there because she didn't want to leave her family, which didn't even live close to her. We traveled to my hometown together and I noticed she was texting an ex-boyfriend. I read the texts and they basically talked about her leaving me and being with him. I confronted her about it and she said he's crazy. If I don't agree with him, he'll threaten suicide. During that trip, she told me she was pregnant, about a month along at that time. Only once in that month's time had we seen each other, so when I broke the news to my parents for help, they suggested a test. Before I could even ask for a test, she told me she was having an abortion. Date set for the 8th of October 2013. At this point, I packed my stuff and moved back home. We ended the relationship that same day. Several months later, I received a letter from a lawyer stating that my child was being adopted by a family. She walked out of the clinic before the abortion and decided to let a couple that she's known for years adopt our baby. My daughter was born the 31st of March, 2014. Just recently, me and my ex started talking again. It's a rocky road, but I hope one day to meet my daughter. She lives near her friends that adopted our baby and sees her quite often. I was married for 7 years. Enjoy 4 happy years and then something switched in my ex-wife. Even with several years of no physical interaction, constant mental abuse, I planned on sticking with my family. However, my time was done in the military, and since I was stationed in her home country she already had a life there. I could not find suitable work, so I couldn't stay. We discussed it and planned on having her move to America and she could go back home on vacation at any time. I got to America, the economy sank. I couldn't find work, couldn't afford the immigration process. Several years went by, and we just grew more and more distant. Then finally, received the divorce paperwork. Only hear from my daughter once a year. Usually on Father's Day, but not this year. I apologize ahead of time if this is not the right format. I am on my phone. I would like to start this by saying I will not bend the truth and only state facts. Some of you may come to the realization that I am indeed a piece of shit. I will leave that to you. I am a 26-year-old male in the United States military. I have a daughter who turned 6 in August. I have seen her for a combined time of approximately 3 days and 5 hours. The 3 days are the first 3 days of her life. The 5 hours come from her second birthday and a trip to McDonald's. I met my ex-wife when I was 19 and just graduated basic training. She was my bunkmate's sister and he showed me some pictures of his family. I saw his sister and almost immediately knew I was going to have sex with her. I asked him if I could hang out with him and his family during graduation and he gave permission. So I went, chatted up his sister. She laughed at my stupid ass freaking jokes and we exchanged numbers. I was surprised she went for me considering I had no hair and I was in god-awful Air Force blues. Out of respect I asked him shortly after if I could keep talking to his sister, which he replied no. I did it anyway. Fast forward and she visits me. I tell her all sorts of bullshit lies to get her to fall in love with me. Lies like I am a black belt. I kick ass on guitar. I only know a few chords. Yes, I was a freaking stupid little shit. Months passed. We find out she is pregnant. All of a sudden I am plunged into something that scared the shit out of me. We break the news to both our parents. My mum and dad are super pumped. Her mum is pissed and says we have to get married now. We do, but we were totally not ready for that. She moves from the city to the middle of nowhere with me. Culture shocked. I am working 12-hour shifts 4 to 5 nights a week. She has no friends. I sleep all the time when I am not working. She is alone and pregnant, and I offer no help. I am so lazy from work that I never clean up after myself, so she has to put up with it. About a week before my baby is born she asks me if she can move back to her hometown. Which I agree, because I know she is miserable. We get divorced, and, because we both sucked with money we did it over the internet. Worst decision of my life. When it is final I end up with getting my child every Father's Day from 6 AM to 6 PM. My birthday from 6 AM to 6 PM. And every other Christmas. I live 12 hours from her hometown. I pay child support and never missed a payment. She gets remarried. I hardly get to see my daughter, because I am either deployed or can't get leave on those specific days. I want to hire a lawyer, but their family is so perfect and happy now and I know that if I button I will ruin everything for my ex-wife. She doesn't deserve that after the shit I put her through. The truly heartbreaking thing for me is she is being raised to call her stepfather dad and to her I am just some stranger that took her to McDonald's once that she calls Mr. Not a lumberjack. I try to ask if I can see her on other days, but they are very few and far between. The worst part is the stepdad is a great dad. Hell, he is a great person. I watch her life through Facebook. Because I am too much of a coward to face my ex-wife and her family. I can only hope she asks one day why her last name is different than the rest of her family. At least I have that going for me. Throw away. Because, obviously. I ditched my wife and 2 kids, because I was forced into an arranged marriage that I hated from day one. Being Middle Eastern made it difficult for me to leave my wife before we had kids without my family turning their backs on me. We had 2 kids, mostly, because we were pressured by our families. I hated my wife, she hated me. I wouldn't be surprised if she fricked someone else to have those kids. Wouldn't surprise me. I cheated on her regularly, including with her own cousin. Her cousin told me, well before I had an affair with her, that my wife was cheating on me. When our daughter was born, I became distant. My mum took care of the baby most often. After my son was born, I filed for divorce. The wife wouldn't agree to it because shitty Middle Eastern culture makes divorcees look like scum. Instead, she took the 2 kids and moved back to England. I remarried and now have 2 more kids. I haven't seen my first 2 kids in over 10 years. Last I heard, they are doing well in high school. I don't care. I don't even know them. I've also been told my ex-wife is still single because our bullshit Middle Eastern culture makes divorced women look like undesirable whores. I'm aware I sound like a piece of shit, but honestly, I'm a product of my environment. I'm tired of foreigners coming to America, having kids here and then expecting us to share the same mentality as them, even though we are Americans. All my friends are married to who they wanted to be married to. I was forced to marry some woman who I can't even 100% say wasn't cheating on me regularly. My proven kids are 8 and 7. I'm with them all the time. I don't ever plan to ditch them. My wife is the love of my life. She was a good friend from middle school who I lost contact with, but eventually reacquainted with via Facebook. We're happy. She's also a first-generation Middle Eastern American, so we both have a lot in common. Ask me anything if you'd like. If not, I don't mind. It just feels good to get this off my chest. I had a daughter. She is 8 now. Basically, I tried to start a business to support my fiance and new family. Bad choice. Lots of stress and drinking. Also bad choice. I put too much pressure on them. Picked up a night job to make ends meet. Came home to find wine glasses and someone else's cigarettes beside our bed. It snowed towards morning. Big footprints by my front door telling me there was a man who had left in the morning. It broke my heart and I sank into an extremely depressive insanity. This was the person I had wanted to marry. Essentially, I moved out and had to focus on putting my own life back together. I moved to a different town, and by the time I was ready to be in contact with my daughter again, the ex was full of hatred. It made phone calls very difficult. It has been 6 years later now and I finally deleted her off of Facebook, saying that if my daughter wants to contact me, she is welcome. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos every day.